We'll get started with a brief tour of just kind of telling what things are before we get started with our presentation. So Jeremy, would you be willing to just do a quick little 1 or 2 minute tour of what the buttons and things are?
Sure, and wow, Australia, welcome. Welcome to everyone else as well. This is Blackboard Collaborate, our online training tool here. And just briefly going through the setup, I'm going to gloss over a lot of this stuff, but if you have some questions, please feel free to type it into chat. I'd be more than happy to answer them. First of all, if you're having audio troubles, please try the audio setup wizard. I'll let you know right now the microphones are all turned off except for moderators, so don't worry about that not working. Otherwise, try the audio setup wizard, walk through the steps. It will most likely resolve any issues you have, but let us know if you do have further problems. In a typical scenario, we have the mics turned on, and you can press the talk button to talk, and it's just press it once, say what you're going to say, press it again to turn it off. If you're having troubles hearing anybody, there is a speaker volume control here. You can just turn us up. The participants window lists everyone that's in the session, all 29 of us at the moment. It's a good number. Those that are bolded at the top of the moderators, feel free to ask us any questions you may have. Down in the chat box, it's a simple chat room. We have the text scrolling on by, as you can already see. If you want to send a message, go ahead and click into the chat bar, type in your message and press enter, and it will appear above with everyone else's text. We have been asked in this session to have questions just as they come up. That's fine, but please type them all out for us. Thank you. And last but not least, the whiteboard, which is this big area. Actually, it's the area that I'm currently working in, but it's placed here in the interface. And this is where all the magic happens. You'll see all the various slides and the like. Today we will be working with the web tour, which will actually be presenting we'll present actual web pages to you. So again, if there are any technical difficulties with that, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. Moving on, here you go, Carolyn.
Okay, well thank you again for coming. This is First Tuesdays, which is a continuing education program presented monthly by the Washington State Library, which is a division of the Secretary of State. Today, your facilitators are myself, Carolyn Peterson, and Jennifer Fenton is also with me as well. And our technical producers are Jeremy and Joe. If you have any issues, don't hesitate to email them, type them in chat, or, you know, if worse comes to worse, sometimes it's not a bad idea to write down the phone numbers because they, you know, it's a good idea to call them if you can't get through if you're having issues. So that's great. Then, again, we want to acknowledge the Washington State, our Secretary of State, Washington State Library, but we also want to acknowledge our funders, which is the Institute of Museum and Library Services. They are the ones who pay for our salaries and support this program. So we want to say thank you to them. And if you haven't already done so, and some of you I see have, please type in your name and your library organization. We'll pause just a moment. For anyone who hasn't done so, please do. So go ahead and type it in. We really appreciate it. We're glad to see that we have our colleagues from all over the United States, and I noticed that Australia even scrolled by. This is a topic of interest. When we saw Rosemary presented this at a session at the Washington Library Employees last fall, and we were very interested in it because the social media these days is a voracious beast, and if you are responsible or anyone else in your organization is responsible for feeding it, it always helps to have ideas, and we thought her presentation would give us many of them. So, okay, I see people are still typing away, but I think we will be able to, we'll get underway then. So, today our presenter is Rosemary Washington, and she's worked as a clerk at the Greenwood branch of the Seattle Public Library for the past 12 years. But again, we are asking her to speak with us today because of her blogging experience. Rosemary loves to write, she loves to take photos, travels, she paints watercolors, and she started a blog some years ago in order to share her interests. And right there, that's rather intimidating. But Rosemary is going to share tell us how it doesn't have to be intimidating. She has well over 1,000 posts under her belt, which is something of a tipping point in the blog world. And she's here today to share ideas about what works for her so that we can all get the most out of our library blogs and other social media. So with no further ado, Rosemary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for that introduction. And I want to thank Jeremy, too, for his tech support in helping getting this set up for me. I'm very, very pleased to be here today, and I thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate. Before I get started, though, I'd like to find out just a little bit about you, so let's take a quick poll. First, how many of your libraries already have a blog? Please click a yes vote if you do.
I'm sorry, in my walkthrough I forgot to cover the polling. Just one second, I'm going to jump back and show where that's at. Right here, you can select a green check for yes or a red X for no.
Okay, and then a second question. Click again yes if you are one of the people who write for your library blogs. Wow, I'm impressed. And finally, question number 3, I'm just curious, how many of you have your own personal blogs? Again, click yes if you're a blogger in your private life. Wow, while I'm talking, I'd like to invite you to write your blog web addresses in the chat box, both your library blogs and your personal blogs if you wish, so that those of us who are interested in checking them out later can do so. I personally have found blogging to be a pretty solitary pursuit. When I started, I didn't know anyone else who blogged. So it's really wonderful today to be among a community of bloggers. And I'm very encouraged to see that we have a lot of hands-on experience in our audience. You'll be able to bring a lot to the table today. So please do jump right in with any comments or suggestions in the chat box as I go along, and I'm sure we'll all be able to help answer questions that might arise. Okay, so let's get started. Jeremy, are you going to put the, there we go.
Just grabbing the URL for you. There's the follow me box.
There we go. So my presentation today will be a series of about 25 actual blog posts from a blog that I created especially for this webinar. This blog is already up, and if you wish, you can access it later on the internet at this web address. I personally find it easier to create blog posts rather than PowerPoint slides. So today you'll be seeing actual blog posts on your screen illustrating my talk. And that means that sometimes you'll see text and pictures disappearing down the bottom of your screen, but don't worry about that. I will scroll down to cover everything. We'll be briefing through these posts, and I don't expect you nor want you to read every word during this session or to click on the links that are in the posts. For today, I just want you to get an idea of the subject matter, the format, and the length. Remember, you can always go back on the internet later to check this out in more detail. So for now, just relax and enjoy the show. That's me hiding behind the book. I'm an English major, and I also have an MBA with concentrations in finance and strategic planning. In my earlier life, I worked in book publishing and as a vice president of marketing for Washington State's second largest bank. Although my library, the Seattle Public Library, does run 2 blogs, I don't write for them. I want to make it clear that I'm speaking to you here today as a personal blogger. This is the web address for my personal blog, which I started more than 4 years ago. I've written over 1,500 posts so far. Now that translates to practically a post per day, although for this past year I've tried to cut back to 5 posts a week. I have over 300 followers and subscribers to my blog, and it's pulled over 250,000 views. My presentation today is tailored for those of us who have limited time and budgets and who worry about their commitment to keeping their blogs going, and for those of us who want to stretch a bit and try something new with their blogs. As a result of this webinar, you will leave with links and resources that you can explore in more detail later. And I think all of us who've blogged for a long time wonder exactly if it's really worth all of our time and if we should keep going. So today it's my sincere wish that you'll leave inspired to try blogging for the first time or to try some new things with your current library blogs. And finally, I'll share some tips about my process, what I do to generate ideas for blog posts. Believe me, if I can come up with a post a day for 4 years and in my spare time, and I'm just one person, I know that you and your library team can do this too. As Carolyn mentioned, I was invited to do this webinar after making a similar presentation at last year's Washington Association of Library Employees Whale Conference. In preparation for that presentation, I took a bit of time to look at what was out there at library blogs from Washington State and from across the United States. I really didn't know what to expect, and I would roughly categorize my findings into 2 main things. First, most libraries, if they have a blog, post infrequently. And I really think this is a huge impediment to your success. A blog is a commitment, and in order to build loyal readers, you need to reward them with new material when they check in, or they'll simply stop checking back with you. If you're worried about generating enough ideas to keep a blog going, I hope to alleviate some of your anxiety today. The second thing I learned is that most libraries are really very good at reader advisory type blog posts. And let me show you an example of what I mean by a reader advisory post. This is an example from the Seattle Public Library's adult blog called Shelf Talk. These types of posts typically feature several books on a theme, recommendations, and book lists. And here's what's so great about these reader advisory posts. First, they include links so that it's super easy for interested readers to place a hold on a featured item with a few simple clicks. And it's clear that the librarians who write these posts are obviously passionate readers and know what they're doing. And the third thing is that some of the best reader advisory posts include links or additional book lists or internet sites with more information. With these links, these blogs become gateways. The extra information is optional. It gives the readers the choice whether to dig deeper or not. Links can also keep your primary blog message looking short, which is good because most blog readers do not want to get bogged down with lengthy posts and too much information. Keeping extra information hidden behind links, I think, is a good strategy. I spent quite a bit of time in my whale presentation building a case for going beyond reader advisory type blog posts. I argued then, and I still believe this with all my heart, that it's important for our library's long-term survival to market the other services our libraries provide, such as our reference expertise. I think of this as one of our key competitive advantages over our competitors like Amazon.com, for example, which also generates recommendations tailored to buyers. Their recommendations are based on prior searches and purchases. Back then, I provided a link to Seth Godin's now famous argument for re-envisioning our physical libraries to become not warehouses for dead books, but rather places, and I quote, where people come together to create, invent, develop projects, and who need a librarian to teach, connect, navigate the world of information, and provide access. Your library blogs can help with this access. Some libraries are already blogging beyond book recommendations, and I provided examples in my Whale blog. For example, one category of reference-related blogs featured tips on using the library catalog more effectively. And you can look at some of these later if you're interested. Other libraries mined their library websites and wrote useful things that our patrons might be unaware of. For example, how to return ebooks early. I'm including this information here so that if you are interested in learning more about these types of posts, you can check back later and explore the links on your own time. And then some libraries were highlighting other things that we're expert at, such as digital tools that we use every day to make our work and home lives easier. Just think of all the resources that we know about to help people save time and money. The links we can provide can go well beyond our collections and our books and our databases. For example, I think a great blog post might be how your library can help when someone's ready to buy a car, or to give information on how to travel lightly and more effectively with translation apps, online guidebooks, language learning, and so on. The thing to keep in mind is that library blogs are a marketing tool, and marketing is all about delivering value. Blogs do this by delivering meaningful and relevant content. If you consistently and repeatedly create content that your readers care about, and you'll create trust and they'll be back. And here's the good news. Finding meaningful content is so easy in our profession. As librarians, we have endless inventory. Just think about it. Almost every single thing we can possibly think about writing is somehow related to our books or our collections. And this is the secret to my success. Things that I have found in books are the starting point for a good 90% of my blog posts. I'll be spending the rest of this session sharing some ideas to help guarantee that your well of ideas for blog posts never run dry. Regardless of the size of your library, blogging is a task that more and more staff are being asked to take on. I want to assure you that no matter how tight your budget or your available time, you can keep blogging. I know this because I have zero budget, a job, a range of hobbies and interests that take my time, a home to keep up, and I still find the time to post to my blog nearly every day. My message is not that you should stop doing reader advisory type blog posts that you're so good at, but I would like you to detach from the idea that there's just one way to share our love of books and get people interested in reading. I'd like to see libraries stretch in new directions and keep their blogs fresher. We live in such a fast-paced world, a world with constant transitions. There's a danger that our blogs will become stale. And rather than following the same book list, book recommendation model, I'd love to see us take advantage of a blog's inherent flexibility to try some new things and bring books to life in other ways. Risk a new approach, and it just might ignite some passion and a response so that yours becomes the next model for our profession. Okay, so my first piece of advice is to think small. And by this I mean that it's perfectly okay to write a blog post about just one book. I do this all the time when a book that I've read holds special meaning for me. Here's an example of a post from my blog about Winston Churchill's book, Painting as Pastime. One of the great things about blogging about just one book is that anyone on your staff can do this. It might indeed take a professionally trained librarian to book talk in a more traditional reader advisory post, but You don't need a degree in library science to share your love of one book. So suddenly you can encourage contributions for blog posts from anyone in your organization. The second great thing about thinking small is that you'll be giving your blog readers what they want, which is short, quick posts. In fact, I often break up more complex blog topics into 2 or 3 shorter posts, each focusing on a main idea or message. For example, I recently blogged about a day trip to Mount Rainier. One post was devoted to the landscape at sunrise and the Cascades in general. Another post talked about wildflowers that I saw and photographed. And a third post introduced my readers to a gondola ride at Crystal Mountain Resort. Now my subject magically multiplied into 3 days on my editorial calendar instead of just 1. Anytime I can do this splitting of a subject into smaller increments, it really helps to keep my stress level down. My preferred way of working is to have several blog posts completed ahead of time, preferably 4 or 5, waiting in the queue with future posting dates set. With my erratic work schedule, I simply don't have time to sit down and write a new blog post every day. So when I do sit down to work on my blog, I try to complete a small batch of posts and schedule them for the coming days. This works very well for me. I'm going to show you just one more example of a single book blog post. This one was about the book, Timothy Egan's book, about the photographer Edward Curtis. It was called Short Nights of the Shadow Catcher. Curtis spent the better part of his life creating a limited edition 20-volume set of photos and essays about American Indian tribes. He intended to sell 500 sets by subscription, but the book details how tough this was for him, and he ended up falling far short, selling only 220. When I finished reading the book, I went to Google to find out where I might be able to see one of these sets, and I found out that the Seattle Public Library was actually one of the original subscribers. They bought edition number 38. So I wrote this blog post about my trip to the library to its special collections section to view this incredible set of books. My second tip is to think like a newspaper publisher. Now, what do I mean by that? Newspaper publishers have to fill many pages every single day, and they accomplish this in large part by having columnists who write regular daily or weekly features. It doesn't take long for readers to look for their various favorite columnists and to know when their favorite columns will be scheduled. This is a very useful tactic for bloggers too. The Seattle Public Library, for example, has a regular weekly post called Science Fiction Fridays. And another example is Garrison Keillor's online newsletter, the Writers Almanac. This one features a poem a day. Garrison Keillor proves that you can deliver daily posts without the added glitz of pretty pictures. If you're a good enough writer, words alone can be enough. Another one of my favorite blogs that I follow, called Zen Habits, also does not include any images. Now, I personally think that photos add a lot of appeal to blog posts. So my poetry posts look and feel quite different from Garrison Keillor's. Let me show you this example here from a blog, one of my blog posts featuring Mary Oliver's poem, Going to Walden. I put in a little picture that really doesn't have anything to do with the poem, but I thought it was kind of meditative. And here's the poem right here. And then I did provide a little bit of commentary about what this poem means to me. This particular post generated 17 comments, which was a very good day for me. Or instead of writing a poem a day, why don't you consider a quote a day? You know this is a popular thing because publishers still produce a quote a day calendars year after year. I'm one of those people like Montaigne who said of himself, I quote others only the better to express myself. Sometimes I start with a quote that seems especially timely or seasonal or meaningful to me, and other times I've got a photo and I look for a quote to accompany it. For this post, I started with a quote about tree bark, and then I expanded it by including photographs of bark that I took on my walk to work. If you decide to do these quote-a-day type blog posts, you'll never run out of ideas. Just pick up a book and find a passage that calls to you. Here's my advice about creating these types of poem-a-day or quote-a-day posts. First, if a daily post seems too daunting, start with a weekly post, a weekly poem, or a weekly quote. To tailor these posts to the library, add a link to the book where you found the poem or quote, or add a list of books by the same author. I urge you to consider adding pictures to make your posts more beautiful. You don't need a high-resolution photo for your blogs. The photo of me hiding behind the WordPress for Dummies book was taken with my iPad. If you don't have someone on staff who's willing to take or share photos, you can find open source photos. For example, tomorrow I needed an image of some Arabic script to accompany my blog post, and I found something suitable on Wikimedia Commons. Finally, choose for your subject something you're passionate about. Eric Maisel, who's a creativity coach to artists and stars, said, "Mere interest does not sustain motivational energy, and it isn't a match for the obstacles that arise when you try to create. You need passionate interest in order to generate energy and to see you through the rigors of creating." Now, I'm an English major, so I love language and words and literary posts. I'm always on the lookout for well-crafted phrases that set me thinking. But you might be a history buff. Then consider On This Day in History or This Week in History type posts, like the ones produced by the Library of Congress. Follow your passions, whether it's architecture, science, parenting, sustainable living, and so on. So what else do newspaper publishers do that we might learn from? Well, they publish regular weekly food or travel features. Food blogs are really big. You can tell there's a big audience for food when you see that publishers continue to publish glossy cookbooks, even though anyone might easily go to the internet to find recipes. In keeping with the thinking small idea, consider weekly posts that feature a single recipe from one of the library's vast collection of cookbooks. A single recipe can make a cookbook come alive. One good recipe can entice me to check out the book in the hope that I find more recipes of the same quality. Here, for example, is a post inspired by a recipe I found in the Betty Crocker Christmas Cookbook. I think we can also learn from businesses that created the local buy local trend. This is one way that small, independent businesses found to compete against big conglomerates. There's a lesson here for libraries. Since so much of what we offer can be delivered through downloads or big national competitors like Amazon, we would do well to become experts on our own local communities, which fall under the radar of the big central delivery systems. So take some time to focus on your local events. Collect and celebrate local stories. Here's an example of a blog post that I did about the Greenwood Car Show, which takes place on the street outside of my library every June. Our national holidays and events are also a natural for blog posts. In my whale presentation, I showed a post by the New York Public Library about Labor Day in New York City. A little bit of history fleshed out with old photos from its photo collection. Let me see, I'm in the wrong post here. Oh, I'm going backwards. Sorry for this glitch. So we're talking about national holidays or national observances. There just really are so many opportunities for blog posts tied to week-long or month-long celebrations. Think about Black History Month, Women's History Month, National Poetry Month. This is an example from my blog about National Letter Writing Week. One of 7 posts that week that celebrated writing letters. My third tip for generating ideas is to think like a curator. When you act as a curator, you're not creating new content, but instead you're bringing to your readers' attention articles, websites, blogs that you've gathered to share. These go well beyond links to items in our collections, and they showcase tempting tidbits found on other blogs or on the internet or even in other analog sources. One of our biggest strengths as librarians is that we are credible and objective. We're not out to sell anything, so our vetting of information is highly valuable. I personally don't post much curated content on my blog, but I do think it's a great fit for libraries, and you might want to consider it. Let me just give you a couple of examples. The online newsletter Shelf Awareness, which is created by the book industry for bookstores, always includes a section called Book Candy, which features interesting tidbits about bookshelves, book artists, papercraft, and so on. Recently, I followed one irresistible link that took me to FlavorWire's 50 places every literary fan should visit. And here's one rare example from my blog. I compiled 4 interesting things about the topic of aging. A link to Oliver Sacks' New York Times article about turning 80. A link to a Seattle Times article about dementia. A link to one of my previous blog posts about one of the best books I've ever read about aging called A Force of Character by James Hillman. And finally, a book recommendation for a novel that featured an 82-year-old protagonist. I knew that my readers would find these resources helpful because of the comments they wrote on earlier blog posts about my 94-year-old dad. Tip number 4. This is another one that will generate endless ideas for blog posts. We want our patrons to become engaged readers, and nothing demonstrates this deep connection so much as books that inspire us to actually do something. Getting inspiration from books is a big part of my life, and so I frequently write blog posts about my experiences. Here, for example, I was inspired to make some watercolor paintings of magnolia blossoms after reading Treasures of Botanical Art. Now, I first heard about the Farm Chicks, who are 2 authors from Washington State, through their book, Farm Chicks in the Kitchen. When I learned that they were hosting an antique show in Spokane, I took a road trip to check it out, and then I blogged about it here. I had no idea they were such a big phenomenon. So I'm going to go off topic for just a minute and talk about how I bypass the possible requirement for model releases. I don't like showing photographs of people's faces if I have not gotten their permission to do so. Unless it's at a public event, for example, and they're performing, then I feel okay about it. I'm generally too shy to ask for model releases, so my solution to get around this is to take photographs of people's backs, hands, and even their feet. I think this results in some highly evocative and effective photographs without having to show their faces. And then think about the do-it-yourself movement, which is also very big. Why not blog about something that you made from a pattern or instructions in a book? Here I made a quilted table runner from a pattern I found in the book, The Modern Quilt Workshop. I just made sure that I took some pictures along the way as I was working. I bet you all know someone on your staff who's handy at making things. Admittedly, the last example was a pretty ambitious project, but even a simpler approach can be inspiring. Here's a blog post about a coin purse that I made using a pattern in the book, The Japanese Paper Crafting. I used fabric instead of paper. It was more durable, I thought. And this was a fun excursion that I took that was inspired by reading the book Food Trucks, Dispatches and Recipes from the Best Kitchens on Wheels. This book featured 2 Seattle food trucks, so I made a special point to take a field trip and sample their wares. Here's my blog post about my field trip to Maximus Minimus. And another road trip was inspired by the book Lakewold, A Magnificent Northwest Garden. When I read that this garden showcased a few specimens of the rare Himalayan blue poppy, I made a special trip to visit when it was in bloom, and it was well worth it. These flowers were stunning. And now for the 5th and final idea for generating blog posts. Commit to some sort of limited run mini-series. I've done this 3 times during my 4 years. And I found it very satisfying to stay with one subject and go deeper instead of just touching the surface with a lot of single topic posts. Let me show you what I mean. I called my first mini project Thoreau Thursdays, Meditations on Walden in 52 Vignettes. Each week I quoted a passage from Walden, and then I wrote a very short essay about what it meant to me. This project was inspired by Susan Hill's book, Howard's End is on the Landing, A Year of Reading from Home. The sample post that I'm showing you here started with the quote, "It is a vulgar error to suppose that you've tasted huckleberries who've never picked them." And I went on to write about how much more we appreciate things like milk or jam when we've labored with our own hands to procure them. That's me 40 years ago milking the cow on the farm. In April of this year, I went on a long trip, so I wanted 30 blog posts in the queue ready to post, one each day while I was away. I used this 30-day window to blog about an art project that I had been wanting to do for years, and that was to draw or paint an object 100 times and note my thoughts about the process. I first read about this drawing exercise in Sue Bender's book, Everyday Sacred, A Woman's Journey Home, which I read in 1996 when it was first published. I'd been meaning to try it, and it took 15 years to bring it off. I chose for this project a moon snail shell, and this particular post reflects on spirals, which I saw as the pared down essence of my shell. And finally, let me share one other mini project that I called my tree watching project. This project was inspired by reading Nancy Ross Hugo's book, Seeing Trees. Her book, with its gorgeous close-up photos of trees, revealed wondrous things simply by looking closely. I decided that I would adopt 3 trees in my neighborhood, a horse chestnut, a willow, and a maple tree, and follow their changes throughout 1 year. This project was different in that it was an open-ended commitment because there was no special announced schedule for these posts. I would simply make observations weekly or more frequently and then post if there was something interesting to share. So looking back on the mini project idea, I see 3 big advantages. First, you don't have to think up a theme or start from scratch with a new idea to write about. This really relieves a lot of stress when you're trying to fill your editorial calendar. Second, mini projects are a great way to force you to stay committed to blogging, but for a specific period of time so that there's a ready out. At the end of the mini-series, you can decide if you want to continue on the same thread, try another one, or bow out. It's a good way to test the waters, to test new ideas. And 3, you might have someone on staff who can help out with blogging for just a short period of time, and they can't commit to a longer stint. But perhaps they could wrap their hands around a short project. I love to try new things and keep raising the bar for myself as a writer, photographer, and artist, and this is why I blog, to keep growing. A blog is such a flexible tool, and it can be so easily tailored to your needs. I hope that what I've shared about how I work and create inspires you to find new ways to bring books to life and to invigorate your library blogs. Thank you so much for your time. And now, we do have some time, so I'd love to open the chat box for discussion or questions.
As you are typing, and I hope you do have questions or comments or maybe share what you have done, I want to thank Rosemary. This is one of the most beautiful, gorgeous talks we've had. We've been doing this for 5 years, and I can't remember such a lovely presentation. I loved it. It was great. So thank you. You set a very high standard for the people who come after you.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for all the time you obviously invested in it. And now Rosemary has asked, okay, Devin said, could you talk briefly about where to host blogs?
Well, are you talking about what platform I use? I use a WordPress platform, the free one. I don't know about how libraries work this. Any of you who work for your library blogs, can you talk about that?
Jeremy, do you want to talk about the Washington State Library blog? Don't we use WordPress as well, or we did?
We host our own version of WordPress, I believe. That gives you a lot more control over it, and it's a free platform, so you can download it as long as you have the server space for it. And like I said, it gives you a larger range of options than you get at WordPress.com. But WordPress.com gives you quite a bit of options as well. They want to try upselling you on a bunch of it, just be warned.
Yeah.
Somebody else mentioned Blogger. That's also that's probably the second most common blog system. Non-scientific numbers there on that. Just in my experience, more people know WordPress than Blogger.
And Tumblr, someone is saying a Blogspot. Librarians,
yes, right.
Yeah, there we go. Own version of WordPress. And I'm going to, you know, I ask you to be patient with us because sometimes we forget how long blogs take to get through. Blogger, you know, some people will be typing when we see it. Blogspot, it takes a while for things to come through. So I noticed, for example, that Dee Dee is typing, but we haven't received her post. But we will just keep watching for her presentation to come through. Okay, other questions or comments?
This is Rosemary again. I'd be curious to know what you see as your biggest challenges as bloggers for libraries.
Let's see some typing going. What's your biggest things? Time. Devin says time.
I can empathize with that.
And Catherine is typing, and Jody. Getting audience interest, says gaining audience interest is what Stacy does. Having a wide enough readership to justify the time spent. Consistently posting. and sensing that we need to shift platforms from Blogger, Google, anyone else moving from Blogger to Tumblr or WordPress? Sarah says she's hit a plateau. She has a good group of followers, but we can't seem to break into more or getting people to read the blog. Jody says she works her blogs for an academic library, but most of my readers aren't part of the academic community. And Susie Pender said exercising an authoritative voice. Now, there was really fast as it went by, Rosemary.
I know.
Woohoo! So we can, if you want, you can click and go back and pick up and move through that chat. Do you want to address any of those things? We can go back. So,
well, again, I'd invite any of you who've encountered some of these challenges and found some solutions to talk about it. I agree. It takes a long time to build an audience. When I started, I don't even think all of my family follows my blog. And slowly, I've built up to 300 followers and subscribers over 4 years. And that's from consistently posting every day. So yes, it can be a big slog. Now, I know that the Seattle Public Library is mentioned every week in the Seattle Times on their Sunday book column. I don't know what kind of partnership or how they arranged this, but the Seattle Times article does mention that the library has a blog for readers, and it's featured in one of the columns every week that's about books. So I don't know if your local newspapers could also mention those kinds of things.
Okay. Sarah had said people who blog for their libraries. Continue, Rosemary, and I'll read this afterwards.
I wanted to say I don't have Facebook, but I do think that libraries who have Facebook and other social media can kind of cross-reference their work.
Yeah. And Sarah, you had said, can people, look at your ideas? If you will scroll back up, I think you will find in the chat that folks did. Many of the people did show, so if you will push the thing back up, you will find that people did share their URLs. And Dee Dee asks, Rosemary typed that she has a camera that is a Canon XTI, is what she uses.
My camera's 6 years old. It's a digital SLR, and I'm very happy with it. It's probably not too technologically advanced anymore. A lot of improvements have been made in the last 6 years, I'm sure.
Well, what you produce is much better than what I could do, so I'm excited by it. Other questions or comments? Or Rosemary, do you have some other questions for folks?
I noticed that some of you said you have personal blogs. I'd be curious to hear, too, about what kind of audience you've generated for your personal blogs and how you built that audience.
Okay, and Devin actually asked a question that got by me there. It was, is anyone blogging for an online community newspaper? Could anyone, say yes or no on that one? Anybody blogging for an online community newspaper?
I'm not.
I don't see anyone. It doesn't sound like anyone. I'm not seeing anybody type yes. No, Sarah says no. My guess is that because we didn't get a response there, that most people aren't. But what about your personal blogs again?
Any ideas for building audiences with your blogs? How have you done it?
I see people typing away, so hopefully that will come through in a moment. Christine Worrell, Jody says, what do you find are your most popular blogs, most commented on? Okay, Rosemary, can you do that?
Well, no. I'd say I don't really know. It seems like lately I've been getting more comments from people, and aging is one really hot topic right now with me and my bloggers. And it all started with a visit back home to Minnesota to visit my 94-year-old blog. And I talked about you know, some personal things about how hard it is to watch him not being able to do as much as he used to do. And the fact that it's getting a little too difficult for him to live alone on the farm, and we might have to move him to town, and he doesn't want to do that. And so that generated quite a lot of interest, and it made me realize that aging, as we baby boomers are dealing with our aging parents, and as we're getting old ourselves, is a really hot topic. And I do think that I would say in general, when I've shared or written about something that has a little bit of an element of conflict, how, you know, if I'm conflicted in my mind, I'm showing maybe a little bit of vulnerability, people seem to respond to that. And I think that's telling me that a personal voice can be really effective.
And a question from Krista Worley. Do you give yourself any measures of success? How do you define meeting your goals?
Are you talking about for the library or for me personally?
For you personally.
Well, right now I have some goals. I don't really know how to count success. I feel like the blessings of my blog are such that I would do it if I had no readers. And let me tell you about some of the things that I find just so wonderful about my blog. Number one, it indexes my photos and my subjects automatically. I've now got 4 years of photos on my blog, and if I want to remember when did I go to Mount Rainier and write about it, I can just go to my blog page, search for Mount Rainier, and it brings up the posts, and then I can tell what year I went and where I went and what hike I took and that sort of thing. So the indexing feature is just so valuable. I've had some opportunities that came out of my blog. Somebody at the University of Washington's Horticultural Library saw my blog, and they invited me to do a show of my watercolors there last year. I've occasionally had some photo commissions. People have bought photos that they saw posted on my blog. So for me, I'm getting some kind of unexpected but really wonderful results for me personally. And I think that if I had more time with this, I would like to figure out a way to package my blog and sell them, publish them myself, maybe self-publish a book of past blog posts, something like that. So I've got some goals, and for me, the blog is just a way to share my photographs and write and think things through. The audience is nice, though, and I have to say maybe it's the audience that keeps me going, because I've tried journaling all of my life. Every New Year's resolution for years on years was that I was going to start a journal, and I could not keep it going for more than a week or two. But with the blog, for some surprising reason, I've been able to keep it going for 4 years. So maybe it is the audience.
I noticed Jessie says, for both my personal and my library's blogs, I pin my blog posts to Pinterest, and Pinterest has become the largest source of views for her personal blog and is increasing the views on the library's blog too. And that's an interesting idea. Pinterest is very, very, you know, one of those sort of new things that folks are encountering.
I agree. I think if you have those social media things like Facebook or Pinterest, cross-referencing them would be an excellent idea. Something else that I do, when I blog about a place that I've visited, for example, the Lakewold Gardens, I always send them a courtesy link. I email them afterwards and say, by the way, I blogged about your facility today, and here's the link. And sometimes they then ask if they can put the link on their Facebook page, or if they can put the link on their online website for a while, and I always say yes. So that's another way to increase exposure.
Okay, Jennifer was typing in, and she says, we measuring success by how many views or comments we received. I think the number of posts is also we take into consideration. We are challenged by our state librarian to blog more frequently, although we don't have a particular goal other than keeping it up. So actually, I think that there was a goal of 2 blogs, two posts a month was what our state librarian had tentatively set. It isn't a hard and fast, but tentatively. So any other questions or comments?
I'm curious about how your libraries handle your blog posts. Is there 1 or 2 persons on staff whose responsibility it is to do this, or is there a committee, or do you sit down and do an editorial calendar once a quarter, once a year, and get commitments for people to write posts on such and such a day?
I noticed that folks are typing. Okay, Sarah Morrison says 2. And the city limits how many people are allowed access to the blog. And Stacy is typing. And as we have, actually there are 16 people in our department, I think, and so and of those, probably 14 of us are expected to produce things. And it doesn't matter when. We have 1 person whose job it is to keep going to keep things moving, but 16 of us. So contribute. And Stacy says, right now I'm trying to reinstate our blog, and I'm pretty much the only one who's blogging. Catherine says, our students and library monitors are regular posters. Teacher librarians view the post before publishing. And Genevieve says, currently we only have 1 staff member contributing to a young adult blog, but we're revamping our website to allow for every full-time staff member or department head to update their own separate blog.
Oh, their own separate blog? How would that work?
Well, Chris, that one, that's an interesting one. I remember hearing someone from the PR community say that was very difficult because lots of times people didn't have time to do it, and they would each do their own, and that they ended up, the library ended up consolidating everything into one stream or for the library. Krista says, team effort on our main blogs. We're moving towards encouraging community libraries to blog and using a central editorial calendar that all could refer to for and JBB says we'll have a tech blog, an adult acquisitions blog, children's blogs, and young adult.
Yes, and I think for the Seattle Public Library they've got an adult blog and a teen blog, yes.
Yes, Christina says, I'm liking the idea of channels in one mainstream. Yeah. And I think when the people that I heard this from, now I'm thinking back, are the PR forum, and they were very concerned about the fact that it be fresh and that people keep it moving and keep it going. So I think combining it into 1 or 2 streams, or in other words, so that it didn't run out or it didn't stop. And this goes to your main program, your main point of you have to keep going with it. It has to keep posting to get something fresh.
Right. But it just can be a little something every day. It doesn't have to be a big, exhaustive thing. Yeah. And for me, it's fun. I hope it's fun for those of you who write as well. I mean, I have to say that librarians are some of the most articulate and well-read and interesting people I've ever met. And every time I have a conversation with them, I think, wow, they'd be perfect bloggers.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I noticed we're approaching 1 minute before 10 o'clock, and we understand that lots of folks have to move on to the desk or their next assignment. So let me just briefly say what our next program is going to be in September. It's going to be a program around the impact survey. And this is an online tool that is being designed specifically for public libraries that want to better understand their communities and how people in their communities use their public technology resources and services. In other words, the libraries, computers, and technology services. UW iSchool professor Samantha Becker will be our speaker. And what she hopes to talk to us about is benefits to libraries, how how understanding a better, gaining a better understanding of technology needs can help you. And she believes that this can help us understand our patrons. It can inform our internal planning. It can back up budget requests. It can bolster community support. You can actually get some hard measurements. And for those of us who are involved in the EDGE initiative, it can improve our EDGE score. So that's what it's going to be all about next month in September. So thanks again for coming, and thanks so much to Rosemary. A wonderful, lovely presentation that was quite inspirational. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lot. Okay. Well, this is archived on the web. And so Jeremy is very good. It should probably be up by before noon, I'm guessing, Jeremy? I think it's